relationship. And so we'll be doing a lot of that. And as we think about it, our marriage, our attitude in life is going to spill over to our children, to our friends. People see our life in Christ, our friendships and our marriage really as a expression of our faith in God. As I thought about how some people live their life and their choices that they make, some people think, I'm going to have a good time in life and I'm going to do it some other way. How about the joys of heroin addiction? Man, doesn't that really come together? As people get started, there's endless cycles of trying to get money to buy more drugs to get high. Well, what does that bring on? Well, there's some temporary euphoria, apathy, disorientation, dysfunction, nausea, constipation, collapsed veins, and if overdose, death. And so is that route bringing happiness? Oh no, man, that is tragic, as is a number of other things, just not as graphic as maybe this is. As we look at the Bible and we think about the biblical secrets to a happy marriage, the first one I would think, by and large, society would reject. In 1 Peter 3 and verse 1, he said, wives, be submissive. The Greek word is hupostasso. It's a military term of rank. Be submissive to your husbands. As we think about that, the kind of thing it means is not trying to overwhelm, shut your husband down. It might be done in different ways, whether belittling him as he's dumb or clamming up, I don't talk to you for the next month or something, or blowing up or being controlling or contentious, all kinds of ways you can really mess up the communication in a marriage. In Proverbs 27 down in verse 25, the writer says, a contentious woman and the rain dropping on a rainy day are alike. Every marriage will have areas of disagreement. But is that your style, to be disagreeable at every turning point? Yeah, but see, I'm not submissive to anybody. That's probably not true. Submission isn't a demeaning factor. It simply means yielding to somebody else's authority. This same word is found in each of these passages. Romans 13, verse 1, let every soul be in submission to the governing authorities. We don't like all the laws, but we obey most of them. I'm not particularly fond of the tax laws. I would like all of us to be tax-free for the rest of our lives, but I obey those tax laws. And really, I'm totally in favor of the speed limit unless it applies to me. We can see all those things. I'd rather it be some other way, but that it is has some merit for the way that it is. 1 Corinthians 15:28, how Jesus is submitting to the Father. You think about in the garden, one of the songs we sang, that not my will, but thy will be done. There's other things that sometimes a husband or a wife would rather A, the family would rather B, and it's just a matter of judgment, and you're trying to bless each other. Christians, Ephesians 5:21, be submissive to one another. And so sometimes people say, I'd rather it be this way. What time should we worship? 6 in the morning, 4:30 in the afternoon. That's all judgment things. And so what you try to do is what works best for the most people. Hebrews 12 and verse 17, be submissive to your leaders. And so believers submitting to elders' authority. 1 Peter 5:5, the younger being submissive to the older. And so there's a lot of areas. Submission just means I'm going to try to bless you. That would be your preference. And so I'm going to work within what God has to say. It doesn't mean we are less than, but richer, deeper, and more trusting because. And so Wives, be submissive to your husband. Is going to try to give, hopefully, loving and wise direction. And in that capacity, then you want to be yielding in those realms. Well, how about the rules for a happy marriage? I just like, there might be, hundreds ones. You say, you could put this in or put that in. I like this one. The rules for a happy marriage is laugh together, forgive. Be the first to say, I'm sorry. And so we do that in our marriage. Here just this last week, just some little ripple happened, and Glenda said, well, I'll say I'm sorry if you say you're sorry. I said, okay, what am I supposed to be sorry for? Okay, well, it's this thing or that. And what you're doing is trying to accommodate. It's not a power play. Show gratitude. Cherish the simple things. Listen. Have respect. Encourage each other. Hug. Hold hands. Kiss. Love each other. Be a blessing. And so I like this picture of cotton candy. This is particularly, it's a special organic kind that is very healthy for you, or not. It's just a fun kind of thing that you're enjoying life. You're trying to do good things and bless the people around you. So how do you love life and see good days? One is just be kind to one another. Some families aren't. They're really hostile and sometimes mean. The reality is, if you and your spouse sometimes argue or are going through a tough patch, it means you're normal. Everybody goes through that kind of thing because you're not the same as your spouse. You're not the same as your kids. In fact, you don't always agree with you, right? I shouldn't do that. Well, I'm going to do it. Well, maybe not. And so you have those internal arguments. It's natural that it would come up with you and the one you love. Think about here in 1 Peter 3:2, wives, if any of your husbands are not won by the word, may they be won without a word as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. Let's say the husband hasn't become a Christian, the wife has, and she begins berating him for your lack of faith. When he didn't have faith when you married him, he hasn't changed. The wife has for the better, but he's resistant, and so it may take a while. Down in verse 7, then it talks about the husbands, dwell with your wives in an understanding way, granting her honor. And so in marriage, it's both ways. You're each honoring and respecting the other person. It's building that other person up. In 3, 8, and 9, it says, be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted. Be humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. Years ago, Jim Hester shared this word of wisdom with me. He said, the way to have the last word in an argument with your spouse is to say, yes, dear, you're right, and I'm sorry. And there's something to that. Because if you say anything else, it just starts another argument. But the reality is, a lot of the things people fuss about isn't life and death issues. They're just matters of judgment. I would rather, and I think we should do 2. No, it should be 3, along these lines. Sometimes what people say isn't particularly helpful. Husband comes home and the wife says, hi, hon, glad you're here. I'm fixing dinner. He said, yep, what are you burning tonight? And so that starts the next argument. A couple was not getting along, and they're driving through the country, and the husband saw a bunch of pigs out on a farm, and he said, relatives of yours? And the wife said, yes, by marriage. And so you can have these kind of little battles going back and forth, but generally, unless both people are laughing, it's not going to be a particular blessing. Be kind to one another. Think about that. Avoid criticizing. I had a professor in college, and I had taken a class of home and family. I was nearly a brand new Christian, trying to learn everything. And he said something, I thought, He said, my wife does something that really irritates me. and I will never mention it to her. I went, huh? Most of us would say, yeah, let me tell you, that's number 3 on my list. But his was the relationship is more important than the irritation. And that has stuck with me now over half a century. And so that idea of being kind, sometimes it's just hushing rather than retaliating. Aren't there times where your spouse says something and you got this zinger? You can say, yeah, well, and you tell yourself, I'm not going to say that. That was just mean or ornery, or it's just going to continue the battle. Matthew 22 and down in verse 39, love your neighbor as yourself. Would you appreciate it if they said that to you? No, it'd just be another battle. Sometimes it's just good to be silent. Ecclesiastes 3:7, there's a time to speak and a time to be silent. Sometimes we get it mixed up. And James 1:19, let every man be swift to hear. One guy says, I don't think I'm doing very good in hearing. We've had a cat for 3 years. I've just found out me and my wife call it by different names. And so, we don't listen. And it's good to say, okay, I want to have a better relationship. One of the things, not only with our spouses, our kids, other Christians, co-workers, is are we kind? There's an area that we can do to love life and see good days, is that to genuinely appreciate one another. That verbal expressions of appreciation that we all need and we're encouraged by and reinforces that we're doing things right. Some people say, look, they never tell me. Maybe it's on the job. And you never know how you're doing, except if you mess up, then they come down on you. That's just not fun at all. Think about Proverbs 31:27, where the worthy woman and her husband praises her, saying, many women have done nobly, but you excel them all. Tell your mate how good they are, how much you appreciate them. You can greet them at the door. I've appreciated, even when my kids were little, I'd be rolling and going all day long and come home and Glenda have the kids at the top of the stairs, yay, and they cheer, yay, Daddy's home. And I appreciate when Glenda does that now. It's just rather than, man, it was a battle out there, and then you come home to another battle. Make your mate feel important, because they really are. You can write a thoughtful card. You can compliment their appearance. Let go of the small stuff that's just habits that don't make or break a marriage. Romans 16, and really 1-5, Paul comments on all kinds of people there in the congregation at Rome, whether Phoebe, that was a servant of the church in Cenchrea, Aquila and Priscilla that risked their lives, Mary, who worked hard, Junius among others who were outstanding. Paul tells to Corinth, who had been a problem child, so to speak, he said, great is my confidence in you. Tell people you're confident in them. Tell people how much you appreciate them, what they mean to you. To the Philippians in Philippians 1 and verses 6 and 7, he said, I am convinced that he that began a good work in you will complete it. You're going to do fine. You're growing. I'm so proud of you. Tell other people, if you're proud of this Christian or that, you not only can tell the Christian, you can tell their mate. You can tell other people. It'll get back to them. And so it just builds them up. Emphasize their strengths rather than focusing on their weaknesses. Say, yeah, but there's this thing. Well, one thing that helps sometimes is we all have failings. And about the time you're thinking, that mate of mine, that makes me so agitated when, you think, what about yourself? Is there anything you do to agitate them? Me? Well, of course not. Most people will say, what would it be like for you to be married to you? Man, I'd have to kill the guy. So, why? Because we have all these failings. And it may be I've got a log in my eye trying to take a piece of sawdust out of somebody else's. So when you talk, be kind. Appreciate one another. How do you love life and see good days? One of the things that I mentioned in various lessons is laugh. Laugh with one another. The reality is life is a stressful business. And if you can make light of some things that in themselves are stressful, it helps. Now, it doesn't help if your wife is really agitated and you in a sweeter than sweet voice, now dear, calm down. That probably is not going to solve the problem. That just throws a little bit more of fuel on the fire. But if you have fun, I like this little graphic. Maybe she said, hey, you got my hat? And he puts it on her and pulls it down over her eyes. I love that. Proverbs 15:15, a cheerful heart has a continual feast that you can enjoy parts of every day. Not every day is fun all the time, but you can inject that kind of good humor, raise spirits, your own and the people around you. Ecclesiastes 3:12 and following, there's nothing better than to rejoice and do good in one's lifetime. Verse 13, he who sees good in all his labor, it's the gift of God. So God's attitude isn't, boy, if you're just sour and negative and trying to find the worst side of everything, boy, that makes God happy. No, that's the opposite. Verse 22, there's nothing better than for a man to be happy in his activities. Enjoy the flow and share that with others around about you. We all the time, every day, where it's little inside jokes. Glenda, I like to tease, and I have these, what I do is it doesn't work for my kids. They see the punchline coming from a quarter of a mile away. But I like to do it with Glenda. It slips up on her. And in fact, we had Joe and Laura Pisano over, and Glenda said, she wanted to know, Joe, what's your ethnic national background, like for your name? And I interjected, I said, he's Polish. And Joe said, no, I'm not. I said, Joe, you don't do it. You're breaking my punchline there. So I like doing little tease, funny things. Glenda, she makes great funny faces. And I can't do it. She's just creative. And our whole family life, she does those great things. Sometimes it's just recalling joyous times together. It just strengthens and encourages and helps you over the tough times. So what's fun in your family? What can you do to make a tough time better? How do you love life and see good days? You can celebrate life's moments. People talk about being in the moment. Well, what does that mean? That means paying attention to what's happening right now rather than we cherish multitasking. I can do 15 things. Yeah, but not well. So what do you do to be focused on what's at hand? Maybe it's your children, your spouse, or what's going on in the day. One of the things is don't dwell on that, well, I could be happy today, but let me tell you what happened yesterday, or what happened this morning, or I could have a better attitude, but what happened when I was growing up? Well, one of the things of how you can celebrate life's moments is don't dwell on the past. You can't change. The past is, whatever it is, good, bad, and different. Apostle Paul didn't. He said that I am an apostle who is not fit to be an apostle because I persecuted the church. He could remember it. He said, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. He didn't stay stuck in the past, because then you can't do anything positive in the present and in the future. So it's all right. These things happen, or I did these wrong things, and it is what it is, but I'm not staying stuck there. And then I like smiling. I don't smile all the time, but I like it, and I like to share that with people and do it intentionally. Sometimes I tell myself, Paul, you need to be smiling rather than, here's this problem. Proverbs 15, verse 13, a joyful heart makes a cheerful face. So think about it. You get up in the morning and, there's endless possibilities. What about being optimistic about it? God, what great things do you have for me today? That starts you off on the right track. And this idea of whatever you're doing, what if I slowed down and really enjoyed what was going on? And just the various senses of fragrances or sight, sounds, events, whatever you're doing together. Ecclesiastes 1:8, the eye is not filled with seeing or the ear with hearing. I love to hear little kids laugh. When little kids are running around the auditorium, Paul doesn't have tend to, oh no, man, from my stand, not during the services, but before or after, I'm fine with that. I love sunshine. You go for a walk and the sun comes out from behind the clouds and you feel the sunshine, the beauty of the mountains or the flowers. Think about things along this line. What if you think about things that you are grateful for as you're in the moment? Everything in life seems like it demands attention, and right now it's the telephone, it's a doorbell, it's the mail, it's something. What if you just focused on one thing at a time? I'm going to do this right now. Slow down. Boy, I tell you what, in earlier years I would have never said slow down. Mine was always, man, we could do more, we can stick more in. The problem is, yeah, there's more stuff, but you can't enjoy any of the one things at that particular time. I say, if you're talking to your kids, enjoy, or your grandkids, bake something and inhale the fragrance. If you're eating an apple pie, I want to get her down the neck. What if I enjoy the beauty of it? And as you get your slice and taste it, you feel the texture of the upper crust is different than the lower crust. And here's the texture of the apple and the sweetness of the sauce. Think about that as you're appreciating it and the person that fixed it. Or the sound and the smell of bacon sizzling, or the aroma of a good cup of coffee. It might be in the summertime, we like to have our meals when we are together and can. A breakfast on the deck. Maybe that worked for you on a Saturday. And just, it's quiet in our neighborhood at this particular time anyhow, and that's joyful. You watch, one of the things we have in our neighborhood, I don't remember us having in early years, is beside, like everybody has birds and squirrels, we got rabbits now, little brown wild rabbits. And so sometimes I'm driving through our neighborhood and I see them, or walking around a loop, and I'll just see them in somebody's yard. We just stop and watch them for a while. Or if they're running across the street, I let them run across the street. I stop and I watch them in the yard. In fact, I was out there in our yard mowing, and right by a sprinkler, a little rabbit ran right in front of me. Well, Paul, what do you do then? I just stop and I watch a rabbit. It's just neat. You're enjoying the moment. Watching a sunrise or a sunset, walking barefoot on hardwood floors or on the grass, or feeling the sand between your toes, rejoicing in a good night's sleep, hearing the sound of the waves at the beach. And everything you think about, whether it's geese flying overhead, enjoying that particular, because the moment is just gone if you don't, and life is made up of moments. Love life and see good days. What about not stressing so much about the stuff? I did a lot of research for this, and it was interesting to me. People had all their suggestions and ideas. There was not one website, there was not one author that said, if you get more money, you'll be happier, and if you get more stuff, man, that will make your day. Nobody says that. It all has to do with the attitude. If we really believe, Proverbs 31:15, that our times are in thy hand. You're in control, God. And I believe Romans 8:28, that all things will work together for good, although the particular thing may not be fun. It might not be enjoyable, but it can have a good result. So Philippians 4:6, be anxious in nothing, but in all things through prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known to God. And celebrate victories, conquering addictions. Romans 8:37, we are more than conquerors in all these things. We overwhelmingly conquer. And so think about your goals and moving forward and becoming what God wants you to be. And in the process, you accept change. I don't know how it is, and as kids, I probably didn't think about this as a kid. Everything is new and it doesn't matter, and everything you do is kind of the first time. But as you get older, you get used to, wait a minute. And I remember hearing parents, and Glenda comments on her mom, said, boy, life has changed so much, and I don't even feel like I belong anymore. And I thought, well, I belong. But the reality is, life is constant change. Our own growth, the growth of our children, they don't stay the same. Your health, your friends, the economy, the country, the rainforest, everything is always changing. Our attitudes and our spirituality. So if we think about Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 1, there's a time for every event under heaven. And then down in verse 2, he says there's a time to plant and a time to uproot. Rather than becoming resistant, oh man, I don't like change. Change is a part of life. And we're young, we get old, our finances change, our attitudes change. Ecclesiastes 4, talking about popularity. There was an old and foolish king. A young man comes along. Okay, you're going to be the ruler. After a while, people say, I don't like that guy. I don't care who the nation picks as next president or the next 5 presidents. Some are going to say, yay! And then, 3 months later say, man, what a loser that is. Let's get the next guy. It always happens that way. But it happens that way in all things. I don't care if it's products. I always used to buy this, or now it's smaller, or too much money, or they quit making it. There's always change. Just adapt to it. Embrace it. Our health changes as we age. And so Ecclesiastes 12 talks about how your sight goes, your hearing goes, your ability for balance and strength go. That's just part of life. It is. Embrace it. Accept it. And the thing we ought to grow in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 18, grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's change. If it doesn't, we're stunted. God expects us and wants us to change in the right way. So you get to think about what's important to you. What's interesting to you changes. I remember as a young guy, man, I wanted to play football all the time. Isn't that what you think about as 9 million years old? Nah, that's fine. Yeah, but what about the Seahawks? Yeah, but they were good back then. Now it's okay. You want to watch football? If you were, I would. But it's not like, wow, man, I cannot wait for this fall to happen. And so with a number of things, I enjoyed skiing, but I find my interest changes. I'm always looking for the next something that's fun, and that's okay. Your style of communication changes. But what we need to think about, we still have a purpose in life. Acts 13 and down in verse 36. David, when he fulfilled the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep. I was talking to somebody just recently about as some individuals, they just retire and stop. Bill Crandall and I were having this conversation. He's just busy almost all the time. And but some people, they retire, they climb in a chair, and a couple years later, they just die. So you get to think about, I've got a purpose in life, and that is to serve God and encourage others, and I want to fulfill that. So a couple ideas along this line, and we're about ready to wrap up. One author said, to accept change is to give yourself another chance to grow. Yeah, okay, you need to grow some more? Yes, always. Maya Angelou said, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. I thought, well, that's really right. I hate it. I'm going to hate it all my life. Well, is that going to help the situation? Is it going to help me at all? One person said, if there were no change, there would be no butterflies. And I like that too. So accept that's the way it is, and I can accept it and grow with it, and I have got a mission to fulfill. And then lastly, how to love life and see good days will be dependent on our dedication to Christ. Think about this. If you retire and there's no interest, there's no drive, there's no urgency in life, I would just sit in front of the television for the next 9 years and die there. No, what is that? I want to do something. Sometimes we will take classes together. We'll try to learn things together. One funny thing we do, this is kind of a little side note. I don't know how to dance. I've never known how to dance. I was in junior high, and I would have kids make fun of me because whatever it is, I don't know how to get those feet to do it. So Glenda said, I would like us to dance. And so I thought, okay, I'll get a videotape. We'll try to do this. That is one of the funny things in our life. We talk about, how can you be so uncoordinated? You can do taekwondo, but you can't dance. And we laugh about it. But what we do is things that are enjoyable, that are challenging, that are faith-building, that are character-building, and they enrich a relationship. And so the graphic here is as though Jesus is pouring water to wash the disciples' feet. That you do things that really are honoring to God and a blessing to others. And a passage we like is Psalm 92:12. The righteous will grow like the cedar of Lebanon. 13, and they'll flourish in the courts of our God, and they'll still yield fruit in their old age, and they shall be full of sap and very green. I mentioned some years ago, Glenda has reworded that for herself. It shall be full of sass and very green. And so you're just having fun, enjoying serving God and reaching out to others. In 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 11, let him who means to love life and see good days refrain his tongue from evil. And it ends up being, let him seek good and pursue it. And so as you do that, in 1 Peter 3:21, he says, baptism does now save you. Not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but the answer of God for a good conscience. If you're here this morning, you say, I want to love life and see good days. God has the answer, and he invites us to come. If you'd like to be baptized into Christ, you believe him, you're willing to repent, confess his name in faith, we'd encourage you to come forward as we stand and sing this invitation song.